You rise up. Siren, brew, travel. 9 hours gazing at a monitor. Head back. Chew, rest, loop. Here's your fate. Here's most citizens' routines. Yet somewhere deep within, you've likely held this idea. This silent, defiant, tiny idea. How if we simply stopped? How if there were no roles, no chief, no schedules, no efficiency appraisals, no attempting to appear active when you've suddenly completed your task an hour prior, and you're just reorganizing your computer folders for the second time, just to seem productive? So, consider this reality. Through the huge bulk of our past, we're discussing hundreds of thousands of years. This was simply known as living. Our forefathers didn't hold jobs. They didn't chase careers. They didn't build an internet resume claiming enthusiastic about integrating cross-departmental business outcomes. Yet somehow, despite huge risks, they learned to persist, bloom, build incredible works, and never waste their spare hours doom-scrolling across sad facts they could fix nothing about. Thus, what did they actually do? Since this isn't merely a quirky ancient oddity, the response to this inquiry exposes something highly unsettling regarding the society we've forged, plus something astonishingly gorgeous regarding the society we lost. We'll begin with the most crucial point to grasp, since nearly whatever you've been taught regarding ancient eras is false. You recall the picture. A rough, filthy Neanderthal pulling a stick, groaning, barely living. Existence was a continuous, frantic struggle for meat, interrupted by cruelty, sickness, and the endless hovering peril of demise. Each conscious minute was engulfed by survival. 0 hours for anything else. 0 room for bliss or imagination or resting. Only bleak, draining, primal existence. This quote, cruel, savage, and brief, by chance, stems from a past-era thinker called Thomas Hobbes, who had never seen a hunter-gatherer in his days, and was chiefly aiming to excuse why monarchs should hold total reign over humanity. Thus, view this claim with a massive grain of salt. The truth, looking at years of scientific studies, is nearly the total opposite. Foraging communities, the nearest alive portal we possess into ancient days, toiled, on average, generally between 2 and 5 hours a shift to satisfy all their core needs. Meals, liquids, housing, finished. The bulk of the day, entirely open. Let this soak in for a moment. 2 to 5 hours, to persist in a realm lacking superstores, lacking running water, lacking electricity, lacking online vendors dropping products at your porch within 24 hours. However, the typical human today works 8 to 10 hours, plus traveling, plus all the unseen effort that pairs with sustaining a modern life. Baking, washing, filing, clearing debts, typing out paperwork, managing with the 17 random memberships you forgot you bought, and yet can't always afford rent. The scholar Marshall Salins publicly dubbed hunter-gatherers the premier wealthy culture. Not because they owned a ton of stuff. They held nearly 0 stuff. Purposely so, frankly, since gear is heavy and you must lug it all whenever you relocate. Yet, they possessed something way more precious than goods. They possessed time, a massive, extreme surplus of time, which instantly prompts the inquiry, what on earth did they do with all of it? The reply, it turns out, is everything. And when I state everything, I mean exactly the traits that render us mortal in the purest, deepest meaning of the term. Not mortal as a productive financial asset. Mortal as in the soul you are at 2 a.m. chatting with a good friend. Mortal as in the version of yourself who weeps over melodies for 0 reason you can fully clarify. Let's discuss about the most apparent one first. Communal bonds. Early folks were extremely social animals, not in a vague performative we're all linked digital network style. Through a primal, physical, endless, inescapable method. They resided in tribes of roughly 20 to 50 members, and these partnerships formed the entire basis of existence. Not background static. The primary focus, the sole purpose, learning whom you might trust, who was amusing, who shared the best tales, who was charitable, who was petty, who was fearless, who privately stored the best berries. This wisdom was literally survival crucial. Your communal awareness remained your most vital talent. Bonding well with peers was not a soft talent. This was the hard talent, the only talent that truly counted in the long haul. They gossiped endlessly. Researchers who have observed modern foraging cultures are continually amazed by exactly how much time gets utilized for chatting. Not productive discussions, not meetings, not project updates, merely chatter. So what do humans chat about when left to their own devices with all the hours in the universe? Mainly one another. Who achieved what? Who spoke what to whom? Who's in a strange mood? The tribal drama, the rumors, the subtle, endless observing of the pack's emotional climate. Robin Dunbar, the evolutionary scientist who handed us the notable Dunbar's figure, the concept that people can sustain roughly 150 meaningful friendships, proposed that speech itself developed primarily as a mode of communal bonding. Phrases as a substitute for the tactile grooming which other apes perform, plucking pests out of one another's coats, preserving ties through contact. We became too populated and too active for this. Thus, we swapped it with talking, which implies that every text thread, every long phone call, every conversation that somehow spans 3 hours and discusses absolutely nothing of functional value. This is ancient, primal, required conduct. You're not losing time. You're acting mortal. Yet, conversation was just part of it. Melody was everywhere. Pipes carved from vulture bones and mammoth ivory have been discovered in caverns across Germany, dating back 40,000 years. To put this in perspective, writing was created roughly 5,000 years ago. Farming around 10,000. Whatever dialects these folks spoke, whatever they consumed, however they structured their lives, long before any of this, they crafted tunes. Plus, this wasn't theater. There was no platform, no crowd, no digital stats to review, no stressing whether the algorithm would boost your track. It was shared, spontaneous, fully collaborative. Everybody was in the group. If you wished to hear music, you played music. The notion that some folks are musical and most aren't is a modern concept, a result of professionalization and specialization. Within small-scale communities, tune creation remained as common as walking. They hummed while they toiled. They banged around campfires. They grooved. Not as entertainment, rather as collective synchronization, as a method of physically aligning postures and neural networks, producing shared mindsets that current neuroscience has just lately begun to comprehend and treat seriously. Ponder about this compared to today, when most folks absorb tunes entirely passively through headphones, solo, as background for other activities, where the sheer thought of just spontaneously belting out loud in public seems humiliating and odd. When grooving without liquor present demands a degree of social bravery that most citizens just don't possess anymore. Our forefathers would find this confusing, perhaps a little tragic. Next comes art. The cavern murals of Lascaux across France, Altamira across Spain, Chauvet. Those aren't basic doodles. They remain breathtaking. The equines of Chauvet are so structurally precise, so fluidly depicted, with such a refined comprehension of motion and three-dimensional space, that when Werner Herzog first viewed them up close, he claimed they appeared like they might have been crafted yesterday by someone who truly grasped what they were doing. These sit 36,000 years old. These weren't ornaments. The location of various rock murals deep within subterranean systems, in near-complete blackness, in tight corridors, in zones demanding intense struggle and danger to access, implies ritual, tradition, purpose, something akin religion, or at least what faith eventually evolved into. A drive to render the unseen visible, to stretch beyond the present and grasp something grander. Early humans were not merely surviving. They were searching for purpose. This urge, it turns out, is not modern. It is not a privilege of society. This is as ancient as we are. Let's discuss about recreation, since this topic truly astonishes audiences. Recreation is not a recent creation. It is not a luxury of the rich or the idle class. This is one of the most essential traits across communal mammals, and for humans, it stretches way beyond youth into the entirety of adulthood. Foraging communities display significant levels of mature recreation. Sports, athletic challenges, gags, complex and often brutal tricks, narrative tournaments, mocking, games of talent and luck. The Kungsan natives of southern Africa, one of the most thoroughly analyzed foraging populations, are depicted by researchers as possessing a lifestyle that is endlessly, almost aggressively, joyous. There exists a strong communal rule against viewing yourself too seriously. Prestige and authority, the type which breeds inequality, are fiercely opposed. When someone arrives from a fruitful hunt, behaving even mildly arrogant of themselves, the tribe will instantly start to ridicule them, warmly yet relentlessly, until they shrink back to normal. They termed this insulting the kill. A tracker carries home a massive, stellar catch. Rather than praising him, everybody starts to remark on how pathetic it appears, how scrawny, how underwhelming, how they've genuinely seen superior. The tracker is supposed to concur, to chuckle, to state, "True, it's quite pathetic. Apologies for this." This is not merely humorous. This remains a complex communal mechanism. It's a shared natural system for preserving fairness, for guaranteeing that triumph doesn't morph into pride, that pride doesn't morph into supremacy, that supremacy doesn't morph into the initial phases of inequality, which ultimately breeds monarchs, nobles, and elites who purchase yachts, while peasants can't afford health debts. Humor in this view is not merely amusement, it's leadership. Slumber, also, appeared entirely distinct. Plus, this fact holds true consequences for how you feel every single evening. Prior artificial illumination, prior the factory labor routine, prior the digital clock dictated on your behalf, whenever you were permitted to remain unconscious, humans did not rest in one continuous 8-hour chunk. The concept that you must head to sleep at 10 o'clock, slumber straight through until 6 o'clock, and wake energized is not ancient logic. This is a relatively modern creation, something that suits the corporate routine better than it suits human biology. Scholar Roger Ekirch invested 16 years methodically parsing through archival papers, journals, clinical logs, legal files, writings spanning centuries and nations, and discovered thousands of citations regarding a totally distinct slumber routine. Initial rest, a phase of peaceful wakefulness during the center of the dark. Secondary rest, this conscious phase, usually spanning an hour or two near midnight, was never viewed a flaw. This was never termed insomnia. It was anticipated, acknowledged, and utilized. Citizens would rise up, chat with their spouses, worship, study, draft, make love, reason through dilemmas. Locals would visit one another. This was depicted in ancient records as a phase of uncommon peace and psychological sharpness, a span of thoughtful awareness between dual phases of slumber, which contemporary society has totally crushed through synthetic illumination and early dawn duties. Contemporary rest scientists have successfully duplicated this cycle during trials. Whenever subjects get placed in environments of natural blackness for prolonged spans without any synthetic illumination, they naturally return to precisely this dualistic cycle. This midnight alertness returns all its own, and subjects declare that the texture of awareness throughout this time frame appears distinct, gentler, more receptive, highly thoughtful, linked to increased amounts of prolactin, the exact chemical which induces a peaceful, tranquil mood among nursing mothers. This issue you label sleeplessness, this frustrating failure to slumber in one clean chunk, might not be a defect. It could be your 300,000-year-old physiological software attempting to reinstate itself against a timetable which was crafted for factory drones, not humans. Now, here's something which tends to truly unsettle folks when they first discover it. Early ancestors might have literally toiled less and dined better than many of the cultivators who arrived after them. This remains one of the more shocking discoveries of contemporary anthropology. Once societies shifted from hunter-gatherer habits to farming, roughly 10,000 years ago, something surprising pops up across the historical archives. Bones transform, smiles decay, skeletons display elevated markers of dietary shortages and illness. Typical stature shrinks visibly. Plus, stature among ancient groups is a dependable indicator of general wellness and diet. Baby deaths multiply. Backbones start to display proof of continuous stress from the distinct stances of farming labor. Squatting, bowing, crushing wheat by hand for hours. Those initial planters toiled harder, consumed a tighter variety of meals, endured more sickness, lived briefer lifespans, and faced worse bodily decay than the hunter-gatherers they supplanted or became. Farming produced excess. Excess permitted for the initial era the stockpiling of meals past urgent requirements. This stockpiling birthed the potential for disparity, of certain individuals hoarding more than peers. This disparity fostered stratification, plus stratification fostered metropolises, plus metropolises fostered literacy, plus literacy fostered the gathering and sharing of information at volumes never previously achievable. Through this sequence arises algebra, ethics, physics, healthcare, engineering, whatever we generally term civilization. Yet for the single human enduring during this initial shift, consuming grain mush rather than a varied menu of countless natural herbs and beasts, wasting 10 hours a shift hunched across a crop instead of a couple hours scavenging across a terrain you've loved since infancy. This was not clearly an upgrade regarding standard of living. Jared Diamond famously labeled farming the gravest error throughout the timeline of our mortal species. That's quite extreme. The marvels which stemmed from this remain truly spectacular. Yet the fact remains that the narrative of societal advancement is not a neat rising slope from savage suffering into contemporary luxury. This contains compromises that we remain 10,000 years later not completely certain were worth it. Let's discuss concerning education, since this is where matters become truly gorgeous, in a manner that generally resonates with audiences. Without the presence of structured schooling, zero academies, zero manuals, zero uniform exams crafted to gauge your capacity to remain quiet and parrot facts, how did early ancestors learn? How did wisdom, crucial survival wisdom, transfer accurately across lineages? Tales. Everything involved tales. The constellations were tales. The creatures were tales. The streams, the peaks, the climates, all embedded into legends, into lore, into chants which could be recalled and echoed. Wisdom which required to endure throughout lifetimes got packaged into emotionally striking, catchy fables and shared lip to ear beside flames amidst the blackness, until this grew into something nearer to reflex than data. Plus, this was not a basic substitute for the lack of text. It remained a highly complex tool for long-term data retention. Plus, in various ways, it beats writing. Native Australian tribes maintained spoken customs which seemed to precisely detail actual terrestrial disasters, magma explosions, extreme shoreline shifts from surging ocean tides during the close of the prior glacial period, incidents which happened greater than 10,000 years prior. These narratives are that ancient. They endured whole throughout 400 lifetimes, lacking a single scribbled phrase, since they were linked to geography, to ritual, to society, since they stayed alive. Your forefathers didn't possess libraries. They relied on elders. Plus, resting beside an elder, hearing, observing, posing queries, soaking not merely facts but discernment and worldview represented schooling in the purest form. The details shared weren't merely facts. This was enlightenment. Ways to interpret a terrain that's poised to shift. Ways to comprehend what climate is truly signaling you. Ways to maneuver a tricky interpersonal dynamic without ruining the alliances you rely upon for living. Ways to confront agony. Ways to confront grief. Ways to confront dying using something apart from terror. There exist lessons that cannot be printed inside a manual. Lessons which can merely transmit via presence, via bonding, via narratives. Our forefathers grasped this, not like some theory, but like a basic functional truth. We've mostly forgotten this. Plus, next came tradition. Rites, the intentional tracking of epochs, delivery, passing, the initial chase, the dawn of puberty, healing from sickness, the shifting of climates, the reappearance of storms. Early folks celebrated such milestones not for amusement, not since they possessed nothing superior to accomplish, rather because honoring milestones remains one of the most essential mortal requirements there is. Plus, neglecting this carries a price. We still perform this, of course. Marriages, burials, commencements, anniversaries. The foundational urge has not vanished anywhere. Yet notice how watered down and frequently superficial our rituals have turned. A foraging coming-of-age ceremony could entail prolonged training, starving, athletic trials, weeks of lore sharing, the involvement of the whole tribe, plus a phase of deep internal metamorphosis that was observed and confirmed by everybody who recognized you. You emerged from it altered. You got acknowledged as altered. The pack restructured itself regarding you acting altered. This validation felt genuine, felt palpable, felt communal. Contrast this with hitting 18 and receiving a letter from your bank stating you're now qualified for a charge account. Distinct vibe. This is not sentimentality. The argument is not that ancient existence was superior across the board. The newborn fatality alone must shatter any romanticizing. Wounds which seem minor today proved frequently deadly. Delivery remained genuinely horrifying. Dry spells, starvation, brutal blizzards, the buffer for mistakes stood narrow in a manner that many of us across the current era possess no actual point of comparison for. Yet the fabric of everyday living, the cadence of it, the interpersonal richness of it, the purpose threaded throughout even mundane seconds, this was remarkable. Plus, we have bargained this away slowly, and mostly without realizing amid the endless maximizing of output, speed, and financial yield. Here's the awkward reflection this entire past raises up against the present. We exist in a culture which labels humans almost completely by their financial output. What is your trade? That's frequently the initial query we ask one another. Not who are you, not what do you adore. What is your trade? Implying, how do you transform your daytime into cash? Your persona remains tied to your role inside the fiscal engine. Early populations utilized no such paradigm. A mortal was measured through their bonds, their intellect, their talents, their place within the tribe, their legacy for bravery or comedy. The greatest narrator, the most educated shaman, the individual who constantly knew where to locate springs. Those represented the folks who carried prestige, not individuals who produced the biggest profit on capital. Whenever past researchers questioned hunter-gatherers what they performed, several provided responses which baffled and annoyed their questioners. They outlined hobbies, locations, friendships, climates. They didn't possess a phrase which converted perfectly into career, since the notion of dividing labor hours from breathing hours plainly did not exist within their cognitive realm. You foraged meals since you felt starved, since you understood where to spot them, since you traveled beside peers you adored, across a territory you understood as deeply as your own flesh. Was this labor? Was it resting? This inquiry would have seemed baffling. Now stare at the present, a plague of exhaustion across the richest nations in documented history. A isolation epidemic so severe that various nations have installed officials explicitly to combat this. Climbing levels of worry and sadness across demographics which stand, by every physical metric, safer and more pampered than any ancestors who previously existed. A common, relentless, tough-to-describe sensation that something vital remains absent, even whenever all the criteria get fulfilled. Perhaps the issue is not that we're fragile or unappreciative or performing something incorrectly. Perhaps the flaw is systemic. Perhaps we have constructed a society tuned for financial output which operates in stark opposition against the biological functioning needs of the humans who must reside inside it. Thus, what did early ancestors perform lacking professions? They gossiped for hours regarding nothing critical, and whatever that counted. They crafted tunes lacking crowds. They sketched beasts across rock walls inside the blackness. They enjoyed sports and mocked one another's tracking, and chuckled until their ribs ached. They studied the cosmos and the climates, and the quiet dialect of beasts, from elders who had absorbed it. From elders who had absorbed it. From elders stretching back deeper than recollection spanned. They rested in split phases, with a sleepy pause during the center of the dark. They honored the flowing of years through rituals, which included everybody, and transformed you. They reared offspring within packs of grown-ups who all recognized them. They rested beside their passing and aided them depart with grace. They remained, by numerous logical interpretations of the term, liberated. Not immune from struggle, not immune from sorrow or sickness or bereavement, yet liberated in the way that their daytime remained their own, that their days were structured concerning connections and purpose rather than timetables and yields, that the query, "What's the meaning of all this?" was resolved every single morning, never postponed until some distant pension they might never survive to witness. Plus the motive this inquiry counts, the motive it's worth pondering over, truly pondering over, is not since we might revert back. We cannot. There exist 8 billion humans across this globe. Farming and metropolises and manufacturing are not elective bonuses. The civilization we've constructed remains the sole one we possess. Yet grasping how mortal existence appeared prior efficiency turned a righteous trait. Prior the digital timer dictated when you got permitted to awaken. Prior your worth as a citizen turned completely linked with your fiscal yield. This comprehension acts a type of compass. This directs toward whatever we truly require beneath all the clutter. Genuine dialogue, melodies crafted together, tradition and purpose, slumber which truly replenishes, hours which belong to yourself. You are not sluggish for desiring these things. You are not defective for hurting within a society which systematically rejects them. You're merely ancient, 300,000 years ancient to be exact, plus some fraction of you still recalls.